Good morning, President Lindsay. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
Very good. So the first question that we have, because we're curious about how you were as an undergrad and what you're like, if you were at Gordon now and you were pursuing a summer opportunity, which opportunity would you pursue?
So I don't know these questions in advance. Well, I think that I would probably, one of the things I think that a benefit of a liberal arts degree is that you stretch yourself. And so I would probably want to pursue one of those experiences that would be outside of my direct major that might give me a chance to do something different. So I'm not an engineer, but if I could be a viable candidate for the thing, Wyson Engineering, that might be interesting to me. I'm not a computer scientist, but if I could get an opportunity to work with EMC in Brazil, I might do that. I think that the main thing that I was always looking for that I think represents what we're trying to do at Gordon is I want to have a stretching experience. I want to do something that's outside of my comfort zone. And so I probably would try and pursue something like that.
Okay.
I don't speak Portuguese or Mandarin, so that also would be stretching.
Indeed. You've been stressing the value of an international experience. How have you yourself benefited from such experiences in the past?
My earliest international experiences really came through different missions ventures. So I served as a pastor of a youth camp in London, England, and that was really meaningful for me. And my wife, Rebecca, I think probably her first international experience, one of her earliest, was doing missions work in Latin America. So that's been part of who we are. But we spent a year abroad. I did a degree at Oxford after seminary. And that really changed my life, not because of getting a chance to study in Oxford, but it was the first time that I really felt very poor in my life. So we were really struggling to make ends meet. And when we would go, so our highlight of the week was to go eat at Pizza Hut on a Friday night. And I'll never forget, it would cost us about 20 pounds to be able to eat. That's $30, $35 for the two of us to eat. And that was a lot of money for us. And we didn't have a car, so we were constantly out trying to catch the bus. And whenever you would go to the airport, you'd have to leave 3 or 4 hours in advance to be able to try and get there. So it really changed my life, changed my perspective. We made some of our best friends of life in that year. And I encourage every single young person to spend at least a season abroad because it changes you.
So let's talk about real work experience. What was your first real job after college, and how did you get it?
First real job. So as it turns out, the man who helped me get my first real job is here today. It's my brother-in-law, Ron Ward, who's here for Christmas at Gordon. Ron, do you mind waving for folks to see you? So I did not have a job when I graduated, and I was a little nervous, and I think my parents were more nervous. But Ron found out that there was an opportunity for a job at a computer training firm in Dallas. I was not a computer science major. I hadn't done any work in computer science, but they were looking for folks who could communicate the basics of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel. At that point, I had worked in Word typing papers. I had never done anything in PowerPoint. I had never done anything in Excel. I didn't know anything about it, but I figured that I could learn. And I fooled them enough that they would be willing to give me a job. And so one of the things that really made a difference for me was that a family member or a friend was willing to help me make a connection. So one of the things that I try and encourage our students to think a lot about is how you can use your network of friends to help you just know what's out there. What are some eligible options, and to try and pursue them.
So you're talking about networking. What are some good ways for Gordon students to maintain a relationship with professors, mentors, friends after they leave Gordon?
I have to say one of the most gratifying things is when I get an email or a text from one of my former students, because it doesn't happen every day. And as it turned out, earlier this week, I had a rough couple of days. And Rebecca has told me that I always need to take the nice emails that I get and hold on to them, and when I have a rough day to pull them out. And so in my office, there's a little storage space, and I have a bulletin board. And I've posted up there an email that I got from a student named Josh Hubert. Josh was my student when I taught him at Princeton Seminary. And he wrote it to me about a year ago. I had not talked with Josh in 8 years. He wrote me a note and just basically said, Dr. Lindsay, I took this class that you taught, and at the time, I really didn't appreciate it. And I found that it's really been meaningful for me. And then he just very specifically said how it had made a difference in his life. And I actually read that this week to sort of help me to remember things ebb and flow on the good and bad side. So one of the key things that I think students ought to do is be very intentional about staying in touch with their professors. And the way that I have done it for most of my life is through Christmas cards. So I just send a Christmas card to folks to say, here's the latest of what's going on with me. But if you end up working in a missions organization where you have a monthly prayer email, something like that so that folks can know what's going on in your life. But here's the reality. If you don't invest in a relationship, it will not pay dividends. So in order for there to be something that's meaningful, you've got to take the effort and the initiative. And really, in these kind of situations, the onus is on the student, not on the faculty member. Faculty teach 30 students in a class, whereas you're only having one faculty member in that class. So if you take the initiative and try and stay in touch, I got to tell you, our faculty, it'll be very meaningful for them. And they could be helpful to you down the road. I bet every week I find out about some kind of job opportunity that might be a good fit for a Gordon student. And so just staying in touch create those opportunities.
So I am wondering why you didn't go directly to grad school and how you decided to apply to grad school during that period.
So one of my big words of advice to students is to think long and hard about going to grad school, and then if you go, to make sure you're going to a program that you're excited about. Because frankly, it's too expensive and involves too much work for you not to be jazzed about what you're studying. And so I knew that I wasn't ready to pursue that. So I took 3 years off, worked in the corporate world, and tried to get a sense of what I might be interested in. And it was the best decision I could possibly make. I ended up going to Princeton Seminary. I never would have gone to Princeton Seminary directly from undergrad. And that changed my life. I met George Gallup. He became a mentor in my life. That created opportunities to go to the UK. That in turn created opportunities for me to get a PhD. I studied sociology. I took a job at Rice, and I'm here at Gordon. My life would be entirely different if I had gone straight to grad school. And I think taking a couple years off to think about it and to really seek the Lord's wisdom in that made a huge difference.
Okay. So what are a few common myths about graduate school after experiencing it?
Common myths about graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
Common myths. Well, I think that many times undergraduates think grad school is going to be like what they experienced in college, and it's not at all. You have a lot more age variety in the people who are there. So you have some people who are married with kids, some people who are second career, some people who are right out of undergrad, just really different kind of life experiences. Also, the statistical likelihood that you will make a best friend in grad school compared to undergrad is virtually nil. You're just not going to find the same caliber of people that you have here at Gordon. And so you're not as likely to find a spouse, you're not as likely to find a best friend. So it's a totally different experience than what you have in undergrad. And there's not a lot of social activities. I mean, I sort of wondered why we weren't having parties and mixers and socials and stuff, and they don't do that in grad school. So I think that's one, that whole part of life is entirely different. The other thing is that the expectations are entirely different. In undergrad, there are lots of checkpoints over the semester to make sure that you're doing okay and that you're following along. And in grad school, you don't have that. In grad school, you oftentimes don't know how you're doing until the very, very end. And for me, I found grad school to be incredibly difficult academically. I had always been a good student, and there were times that in grad school, I could tear up at the stress I was feeling. I was being assigned to read between 500 and 1,000 pages a week of very difficult, dense material. And I had problem sets in statistics, and I had faculty members who were incredibly intimidating. I had one faculty member who basically humiliated me in front of all my peers. Every week at Princeton, part of the evaluation is that you submit memos based upon the reading. They use this phrase memos. It's really, it makes it sound easy. You wrote short papers, original short papers every week on what you had read. And so I submitted my memo. And she decided to use my memo as a chance to sort of teach the entire class. So she critiqued my memo by hitting reply to all on the entire class. And the closing line of her feedback to me was, I don't know how you got into this program, but I think you're going to have a hard time if this is the quality of the work that you turn in. Well, that was an humbling experience. And over the course of that semester, pretty much every interaction that she had with me in class was a moment where she humiliated me. And so I also think that grad school is one of those environments where you need to be spiritually grounded and feel really solid about what the Lord's calling you to. At the same time, I'm also convinced that most of the professional jobs in the workforce over the next 50 years are going to require graduate educations. So I think all of us will be pursuing graduate education. The key thing is to make sure you're going to a grad program that you're really excited about and that you feel passionate about. And my observation is that most students who are graduating from Gordon are still trying to figure out exactly what God's calling them to do. So don't hesitate about taking a couple of years to figure that out. It worked for me.
So I have a sort of a fun question that somebody emailed in. I'm just going to read it word for word.
Okay.
While a college student, did you ever play pranks on others and or cause any ruckus?
What to say? So I was in a fraternity, and those are always groups known to do things in an unconventional way. But I think I will bypass that. So I'll tell you one thing. So I dated Rebecca in college, and we'd probably been dating about a year or so, I think, at this point. And I decided I wanted to do something fun. And Baylor was like Gordon in that guys were not allowed into women's dorm rooms all the time, so they have visiting hours. And I got her roommate to let me get into her dorm room. And I turned every single thing upside down in the dorm room. I turned the TV upside down, the bed upside down, the things in her closet upside down. And I left a note and said something like, she had turned my world upside down. And so, hey, it worked, man. Yeah. We're married. Yeah. So that was probably one of my best pranks. She retaliated and stole all of my clothes.
So there's an article on the Gordon website about you going to the gym. I think Ken Hollenbach wrote it last year. And there's a segment where there's a picture of you bench pressing, but it's not clear how much weight is on the bar. And so how much it says DML, how much do you bench?
Come and check it out.
So I have a question that I believe will reveal your character very much so. And I'm going to say it exactly as the audience has sent it to us. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
I don't even know what to do with that. A horse-sized duck.
Woo, that's nuts.
So on a little more serious note, somebody texted in, what was the rock bottom moment in your life and how did you persevere?
That's a gear shift. What was rock bottom moment? The rock bottom moment happened when I was my first year of grad school. And I had felt very called to this graduate program, PhD in sociology. I mean, I really did feel called. And it was an incredibly competitive process. I didn't know how competitive it was, but very few, 8% of people get into the program. And I was vastly underqualified. I mean, truly, it was a miracle of God that I got into the program. And I had this professor, and she was sort of beating me up in class almost every single week. And I was really doubting my ability to do well in this program. I was doing a PhD in sociology, and I had taken one undergraduate course in sociology my entire life. And it was incredibly difficult. I'd never felt as stupid as I did that semester. I would work enormous hours to try and just keep up, and my classmates seemed to just be doing fine. And I was really miserable. I prayed for the Lord to give me a sign. And I applied for 2 fellowships to try and support my graduate education. One was to a Christian foundation based in Washington, and one was to the National Science Foundation. And the National Science Foundation was just a long shot. Everybody in my cohort in grad school was basically expected to apply for it. It's the most prestigious fellowship that you can receive as a graduate student, and it's an amazing opportunity, but it's really, really competitive, very hard. And so I applied for both of them and prayed that the Lord would speak to me on what I ought to do. And to be honest, I thought that the NSF thing was sort of a foregone conclusion, but I thought he might speak through that Christian fellowship. And it's called the Harvey Fellowship. And when you go to grad school, if you go to a top 5 program in your field, you should definitely apply for it. It's an amazing program, and it's an amazing group of people. And I applied for it. And I was really using that as a way to see what the Lord wanted to do in our life. And I think probably the lowest point, certainly professionally, of my life was when I got the rejection letter for that fellowship. I'll never forget it. I went to the mailbox and I opened up the envelope, and I knew it was from the foundation, and my hands were shaking. I don't know why I was so nervous, but I felt like my future was on this page. So I opened up the letter, and your eye can quickly scan, and I saw the word "unfortunately." And I thought, I have made the biggest mistake of my life. I moved back from England to go to Princeton. I moved my wife away from her family, and I'm humiliated on a weekly basis in class, and I feel like a total failure. And now I so much missed God's will, apparently, that even the Christian Foundation is saying, give it up. It was in February. I remember it very distinctly. And it's emotional for me to recall at this moment because it was so devastating. It's very hard. In God's providence, however, the miracle occurred, and about a month later, I found out that I got the NSF. And the NSF was such an utter shock. I actually thought they had mixed the lists. If I was shocked, my classmates were speechless because they just couldn't imagine. I mean, it was just totally unbelievable. And in the moments of sort of trying to make sense of what is the Lord doing here, because, I got rejected by the Christians, for crying out loud. I got an email from a classmate who's not a person of faith, but she and I had become friends. And she said, I know you were looking for this is in her email, I'll never forget, she sent this email, congratulations on the NSF. And she said, I know you were looking for some kind of confirmation of if you're in the right place or not. And I just have to say, I don't think you can get a bigger confirmation than this. And as my eyes read those words on the screen, it was as if the voice of God was speaking to me. And that was the turning point. So one of the things that I'm very grateful for is that ours is a God who redeems very deep pain. And I experienced incredible despair in that month of February. And then a month later, he redeemed it. And I stuck with it. It still was hard. That professor was still tough on me. And there were lots of moments when I wasn't sure that I should persevere. But by God's grace, And with the encouragement of Rebecca and family, we stuck with it, and it changed my life.
I'm curious, what's the relationship like with that professor now?
One of the interesting things is that after I got the NSF, she invited me to her house for dinner and said that she wanted to mentor me. And what I realized is that there are people in the world who are all about titles. And for her, I was not worthy of her attention because I had not earned an undergraduate degree in sociology or had not performed at the level that she expected. But when I got outside confirmation that I had promise, she suddenly wanted to be my mentor. So I didn't take her up on that offer. I tried to be gracious in my interactions with her, but frankly, I've never trusted her since.
So what wisdom can you share after an experience like that with Gordon students who are clueless about his or her vocation in their life?
So I really do think that the Lord honors our prayers when you ask him to show you what to do. Now, it doesn't always come in that clear of an indication as I got, but I really do think ours is a God who wants to give us answers. He really does. And so I think if we earnestly say to the Lord, God, I'm trying to figure out what to do next. Would you guide my impressions and my instincts and my thoughts and my reflections? Would you use the people in my life to help nudge me in a certain direction? And would you give me the courage to try out some possibilities? So one of the key things that I want to just really encourage our students to do is to be willing to take a step of faith. So I never would have gotten the confirmation that I needed to stay in that program if I had not applied for that application. And let me tell you, it was a lot of work. I probably spent 40, 60 hours working on that application. But God used it as a way to sort of give me guidance and direction. So my great encouragement to you is to pray for courage, to take the step, and then to listen to those people in your life. Professors, one of the great things about Gordon is that our professors and our staff really do care about students way beyond just caring that they learn the material in the class. And so I think professors can speak into our lives in very significant ways. And I know my colleagues well enough to know that they want to do that. So pray for courage, seek out opportunities, and then pursue the counsel that God puts into your life.
So somebody asked, do you have free time? And if so, what do you enjoy using it for?
I do have free time. I use my free time to hang out with my family. So Rebecca is great about bringing Elizabeth, Caroline, and Emily to come by the office. And when the weather is nice, we take walks around campus, and we try to do that, every other day, something like that. When I have total free time, I like to take trips. So we'll take vacations. And typically I sleep a lot. I really love to sleep, and I don't do a lot of it. So I try to bank it when I can. A week ago, we went to go see the latest James Bond film. So I'm a Bond fan, so we enjoy doing that kind of stuff. But mainly hanging out with the girls.
You mentioned you like sleeping a lot. Just to be clear, President Lindsay does not sleep a lot. I get often emails at 2 in the morning about, I think it's not unique. So
Working for you guys.
Somebody asked, where would you say Gordon College stands in the competitive realm of colleges, and have we become more well-known in the professional sphere?
Great question. So when I was considering coming to Gordon, I've been offered the opportunity and was very prayerfully seeking the Lord's guidance. And I reached out to somebody who, I can't give you his name, but he is certainly one of the most accomplished intellectuals who is also a committed Christian alive today. Incredibly talented. And I said to him, what do you think about Gordon? Direct quote. He said, within the constellation of Christian higher education, Gordon College is the brightest star. This is a very learned man who has knowledge of virtually all of our competitive schools. And he thinks Gordon is the very best. As it turned out, I got an email from him last night, and he reiterated that to me. I think that Gordon, because of where we're located, we are on the leading edge of trends in Christian higher education. I think we're 5 to 10 years ahead of where every other institution of higher learning that's faith-based is today. We face issues before everybody else does. It's because we're in Boston, which is a place that is not in the Bible Belt, and because it's the intellectual capital of the world. This is where all new ideas start. It's where great research and innovation occurs, and that's where Gordon is. So we're at the leading edge. Now, we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of things that we need to do. Our students need to become more known for making a difference in the wider world, which is why we're creating these global internships. You know, we probably, when it's all said and done, will have 20 to 50 spots available for students, and I hope we have 500 students apply for them. We want you to be out there, and that's really important to helping to raise the profile of the institution. This past year, we've been able to create a lot of good resources to try and help students, but we want you to take advantage of them. So I came to Gordon because I'm incredibly bullish about our future. I'm convinced that we are the finest faith-based institution in the world, and our goal is to try and help more people to know about it.
So speaking of faith and work, one of the questions that came in from our audience is that it can be difficult for students to balance both their faith life and their work. How do you manage to balance these two in your life?
So for me, I find that the best way in which I can be really faithful to God is through spiritual discipline. And it is discipline. It's not emotion. It's like I force myself. So what I do is I have a set of prayer requests that I divide up into days of the week, and I put them on little index cards. And as I'm getting ready in the morning, I pull those out, and those sort of guide my time of prayer. So while I'm shaving, showering, different things, I use that as my time to pray. And I pray through the things that are on that list, but then also things that are just on my mind. So praying about meetings that I'll have that day, interactions or relationships or things that I think are really important. So prayer is very important to me. And I learned from one of my mentors a long time ago to make prayer like breathing. So I pray, I say a prayer to God, probably 15 to 20 times a day, just in casual interactions. So I just came from a meeting of the Advancement Council, and we were debating about something we were going to do. And in that moment, I felt like I had to make a decision of if we're going to go forward with it or not. And I was sort of reading the audience and could see where they were leaning. And I wanted to know if that was the right thing to do. And I felt like I needed to make a decision. So I just prayed. Other people were speaking, so I asked the Lord to give me counsel to see if this is the right thing to do. And that's a part of sort of my regular routine. Reading scripture is a part of my regular routine as well, because I think we have to be in the Word to nourish that. So I typically try to really bring that as part of my daily life. And then church is really important to us. So Rebecca and I are very faithful in our church attendance, and that's become really important to our community. That's how I try to bring my faith into concert with my work. It's really helpful at a place like Gordon because there's lots of other things that can prompt me to think about the Lord on a regular basis. But even when I was a faculty member at Rice or a grad student at Princeton, that was part of sort of my routine.
Okay. So another question that's come in from the audience, maybe a little bit more difficult, but I think you can handle, deals with doubt at Gordon. So I'll just read the question.
Yeah.
As a Christian college, our obligation is not only in educating Christian values, but also in helping the students grow and ask questions so that we can keep our faith even after college. Are there any spaces in Gordon where we can freely and safely ask questions about our faith? If not, is Gordon planning to make a place like that so we can learn how to deal with these questions even after we graduate?
So one of the things that I think is the great benefit of being at a Christian college is that it's a safe place where students can actually doubt. And I think that faith only grows after we have emerged from a season of doubt or questioning. And so we very much want the big questions of life to be brokered. And it's part of the way in which we frame the Great Conversation in our freshman seminars, and it's how we structure our classes. I know that my faculty colleagues think that that's really important. And Gordon is not a season of indoctrination. It's really about education, and we think that involves a healthy degree of skepticism and of questions. And so that framework, that we laid out, where we really want folks to have the freedom, the intellectual elbow room to think and ask the questions. So whether it's publications like If I Told You, or if it's in forums that we have through Deep Faith, we try to create opportunities where students can really bring their deep questions and to be in conversation with Orthodox Christianity. I think Gordon does a better job of that than virtually every Christian college I know of. And we're committed to trying to make sure it continues.
So someone asked or said that they really want to find a great and wise mentor. How can they go about finding him or her?
So I prayed that the Lord would give me a mentor. And it was something I prayed for on a daily basis. And what I found is that they came in surprising places. So that was a prayer I had virtually through all of my college years. And I had professors that were really meaningful to me and a couple of people who really spoke into my life. But I have to say that most of the time they didn't come from me sort of filling out an application for mentor-protege relationships. It was more organic. And so in my own life, there have been 3 people who have been very significant mentors in my life. One is a man named Bill Townsend, who was my mentor in high school. His wife was my youth minister, and Bill was very important in my development. And he was the person who encouraged me to think of Rebecca not just as a friend, but as a possible girlfriend. And that worked out well. And in the end, he was the one who performed our wedding ceremony. So he's really meaningful to me. Another is a guy named Gary Cook, who I met because I taught his son in 8th grade Sunday school. And so he just reached out to me, and he became a great mentor. He's the president of Dallas Baptist University, and he's still a mentor and great friend. And third person was George Gallup, the Gallup poll. George really came as a result of prayer. He served as my mentor for an internship experience. So one of the great things about these internships that we're talking about is that they can turn into a life-changing relationship. So I really encourage you to think about how you can leverage those to see if the Lord's calling you to something new and different. So I got wise and meaningful mentors really as a result of prayer. And it was not a prayer that I made one day. It was something I made a commitment to for years.
So on the topic of prayer, somebody asked, do you have any prayer requests? How can we pray for you?
That's very touching. Yeah. One of the things about this job is that it requires you to work really hard on things that sometimes don't come to fruition. And that is disappointing. And so there are probably a series of maybe 5 or 6 opportunities that we're working on right now that haven't come through, that I would love for you to pray. Pray that God would give us real discernment, give the cabinet real discernment, and frankly, give Gordon College favor. So if you pray along those lines, that would mean a lot to me. Yeah.
Well, President Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us in conversation this morning. And please join me in thanking President Lindsay
Thank you.
in conversation.